I would point out that there's a lot of usury that isn't called usury. It's when you can't get your car out of the shop and you have to go rent a car or use a bus because you can't get a $400 loan. It's when your lights are turned off and there's no usury there except it costs $100 to get them turned back on, not to mention what you pay for candles in between. But that doesn't mean that every payday practice ought to be allowed. Ms. Wilson, you talk about ability to pay, and I hope that you'll help us develop a more sophisticated phraseology of that, because in every 100 borrowers, there's somebody who isn't going to pay. And I don't want to go back and have a class action lawsuit against a lender. The only reason they're making the loan is because they know 90% of the people are going to repay eventually. Every payday lender would be out of business if nobody, if 20, 30% didn't pay them back. So it really comes down to whether a substantial majority of those borrowing are going to repay substantially according to the terms of the agreement. So the one problem, the character of payday lending is, yes, people repay, but the original agreement is they're borrowing the money for 2 weeks, and they end up paying back 26 weeks later. So I hope we can work with a more sophisticated standard that would look in terms of, does a substantial majority of the borrowers repay with only a few late fees or a few extensions? If we were to say that a substantial majority had to repay a loan without any deviation from the terms of the loan, I couldn't get a mortgage. I had a late payment. Everybody I know had a late payment once. So I guess the point I'm making is it can't be ability to repay eventually, and it can't be ability to repay exactly according to the terms with no late payments. It's got to be a way of looking at what loans are being made and whether the majority can substantially comply with the loan agreement. We've had, I think this question has come up a bit, but the issue is whether we should have a commission rather than a single commissioner over at the Consumer Protection Agency. When you have just one commissioner, it's of the President's party. And so I strongly believe in having one commissioner right until the end of 2016. But I don't know who the President's going to be in 2017, and neither do the gentlemen over there, so this might be a good time to be bipartisan effective 2017, which has a 50% chance of being adverse to one or the other of us.
Is that an offer?
That's an offer.
We'll talk about it.
But what is, I'll start with Justin because I promised to torture him a little bit, and also anybody else. What are the advantages and disadvantages of going with a commission rather than a commissioner, knowing that a commissioner is a little cheaper, a tiny bit cheaper, and a little bit faster? Justin?
Well, as I discussed with Mr. Scott earlier, I think that a multi-member commission provides a process by which issues are considered carefully, and staff has to make a case to the commission before they go forward with a rule or an enforcement action. And it's a more deliberative process that produces better policy that offsets consumer protections against the need to ensure affordable access to credit.
May I?
Yeah, go ahead, Mr.
Let me give you an example. When the CFPB presented its paper on where they intended to go with short-term small dollar lending, essentially a payday story and a media event, it was entitled Debt Traps. If you had a commission, I believe that there would have been a dissent which would go along these lines. Before you say debt trap, prove it. Before you say debt trap, remember that you're the arbiter and you are giving a sense that you're not partisan. So
I've got you, and I'd like to propose it for this committee. Instead of having a chairman, we have a commission decide, because I've seen titles of hearings such as examining the regulatory burdens but not any benefits to the consumer on non-depository financial institutions. So the title of a hearing can be very important, and the desirability of a commission to make all decisions is duly noted.
Maybe we can discuss that in 2017 as well.